Steve Marchand here. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see people rolling in over the next several minutes. Hope you enjoyed today's column. We could probably touch on that a little bit
Yeah.
during the course of the next hour. But really pleased today to have somebody who's not just, I think, one of the most effective elected officials that we have in the state of New Hampshire, but she's also a longtime friend of mine. So it's a real pleasure to have Executive Councilor Karen Liot Hill here with us today. How are you, Karen?
Oh, I'm great. Thank you, Steve. And yeah, I was remembering when we met, which I think was back when we were both mayors. I was mayor of Lebanon. So this would have been like 2008, I guess. 2009, you were mayor of Portsmouth, and Jim Boulay was mayor of Concord, and he was hosting, I forget whether it was monthly or quarterly meetings, but where the mayors of the 13 cities or whoever could make it would get together. I met you then, and it's really great. We've been around for a while, and so anyway, it's great to be with you today, and yeah, appreciate you having me on.
Well, it's wanted to do this for a little while, and as folks can probably tell, if you're those watching obviously live now, but then the recording, we'll have it on YouTube as well, so those folks will get the video of this. But you can tell we're doing this as we are in the throes of the holiday season. Christmas a couple weeks away. All the great holidays this time of year. It looks like you got some Christmas garland
Do.
behind you here.
Yes,
Uh,
I love the holidays. In fact, I spent the morning singing. This week, I am touring, this week and next, I'm touring all of the county nursing homes in my district and doing a little, bringing my piano and doing some holiday sing alongs with the residents. And it has been so fun. So I actually just got back from North Haverhill, where I got to sing with the residents of the Grafton County Nursing Home this morning. And so I'm a big fan, and I think part of the job is spreading some holiday cheer, right?
No question. So I've heard you sing, great voice, and play some piano. I saw an event this spring. I think it was in support of your campaign, and usually folks like having some entertainment, but usually the candidate or the office holder is not the source of the entertainment. So tell me, when did you start getting into music? Was this something as a child, and you've just continued it for the last several decades, or where's the love of music come from?
Yeah, well, I'm the oldest of 6 kids, and money was tight when money was tight in my family growing up, and I was really lucky because my parents, like, scrimped and, made it possible for me to have piano lessons. I wanted them so badly, and so when I was about 10 years old, I think, I started having piano lessons, and, I was able to do that then, like, through high school, so I had a good 6 or 7 years of lessons and started playing in church. It's probably not a surprise when you come from a big family. Like, we watched The Sound of Music all the time. I think we really believed that we were the Von Trapp family singers. And so there was a lot of singing and music in my house growing up. And so I was really lucky to grow up that way and then to have the lessons and played in church. So I've always been a church musician over the years. And then over the years, I've also played with different bands or kind of on my own. I used to have a band with Paul Hodes and John Bressler, in fact,
Okay.
for a while, Northern Lights. And so it's just been a really wonderful part of my life all these years. And, it's nice because it's like, it's so different from politics and government. And so it's nice because it just allows me to express myself in a different way. And I find that the music, for me, is a way that it kind of like recharges my batteries. And so I really enjoy it.
So what do you listen to when you're trying to relax? Maybe you're in the car, whatever. What kind of music do you listen to? Favorite artists?
Oh, that's a really great question. Well, there's a few albums that I really, really love. Like, I would say Joni Mitchell's Blue album is one of my
Okay.
top albums of all time. I really like to listen to Grateful Dead. I'm a Grateful Dead album person. Not so much their live shows. I am-
Yeah. Oh
but
yeah.
and actually, like, I really have been loving Chapel Roan. So Chapel Roan, she's new artist, and she kind of powered my campaign in 2024. She was definitely I was listening to a lot, and I listened to a lot of Sabrina Carpenter lately. Her new album, I'm a big fan. So I listen to everything, quite honestly.
Oh, it's great. My wife, Sandy, and I have been married for over 24 years. And I do think that a lot of times, if you're married long enough, your interests begin blending. So Sandy
Right.
has become about as big a football fan as I know, which is, as far as I'm concerned, really the ultimate gift. There's a reason for the season. And then she has gotten me more into country music.
Yeah.
Which she's from Missouri, grew up around country music, and and the more I listen, the more I like it. Whether it's something old school, like some George Jones, we've been to Eric Church concerts probably 7, 8 times. I mean, all some good stuff. And I just feel like with music, the more I get exposed to stuff I've not really heard much before, I typically end up liking it. And it's just a matter of what have you had a chance to be exposed to?
Yeah, and I used to be one of those people, and I know there are a lot of them who say, if you say, "What do you listen to?" People say, "Oh, everything but country." And
Yep.
I used to be one of those, but I'm a radio DJ. That's how I actually pay my bills.
Yeah.
And I am on a country station, and so I started listening to country music because I figured I should know the music that I'm playing, and it turns out I like country music. So, it really is good to be open-minded.
Absolutely. So, well, finishing up your first year on the council, certainly not your first rodeo in elected office. You've done city council, you've been a mayor of Lebanon, you've been, I think you were a 4-term county treasurer in Grafton County. So you've been around the block on this stuff. But first year on the executive council, it's a 4-1 GOP council, and the way that the districts are drawn up, it's kind of defaulted that way in a lot of the recent election cycles. How would you describe the experience, particularly given that 4-1, compared to what you anticipated it would be like when you walked in the door the first day?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I will tell you, first of all, I wake up every single day and I feel so lucky that I get to do this job. I love it so much, and um, I knew I was gonna like it, but I like it even more than I had anticipated. So, that's, that's the truth. I would say also I did have a feeling. I knew that my background as a city councilor had prepared me well for this job, but I didn't realize how well actually it had prepared me. The executive council is really a lot like a city council. It's just for the entire state. The state is divided into 5 districts, and there are five, so we each represent a, a fifth of the state. My district, because it's so rural, happens to actually cover about a third of the landmass, a third of New Hampshire cities and towns. So I represent 81 cities and towns in Western New Hampshire. It is packed with all of the Democrats. And so that is why there is, because of gerrymandering, that's why there is this 4-1 Republican majority, even though our state, is really much more of a purple 50-50, pretty evenly split state. And we even send a Democratic delegation to Washington, D.C. Because of gerrymandering, that's how the executive council and the state senate, as you know, are heavily favored to the Republicans. So the work is very similar. I use the word cars when I talk about the executive council. C is for contracts. So the executive council is responsible for voting on all state spending. A is for appointments. The governor makes nominations and the executive council votes on them. So that's all judges for the state, all commissioners, really important positions, as well as hundreds of board members, volunteer board members on Fish and Game Commission and a lot of other boards. And then R is for roads because the executive council is responsible for updating the state's 10-year highway plan every 2 years. That's a really big deal. Roads, bridges. We're also responsible for dams, for the prisons, all the infrastructure, which is the same at the local level. It's just a lot more and it's bigger. And then the S, cars, contracts, appointments, roads, and services. S is for services because it is a lot of constituent services, whether it's, individuals or it might be helping out a city or a town. Maybe there was, flooding and the road got washed out and they need help connecting with the Department of Transportation or a nonprofit that has that receives state funding. So there's a lot of helping people get answers and get connected with the right folks in state government and just, helping make sure that they're getting what they need from state government. So that is the kind of work that I've done for the last 20 years as a city councilor. And so I feel like I have a really great background and framework to understand what we're working on at the state level. We literally meet twice a month, just like a city council. The governor sits at one end of the table and the five of us sit around the table. And we're a check and balance on the governor. New Hampshire has the weakest governor in the country because the governor of New Hampshire can do very little without the approval of the Executive Council. And so she gets to set the agenda. She gets to decide which contracts come forward. She gets to decide on who she's going to nominate, but she doesn't get to vote. The Executive Council, we're the ones that get to vote, but we have no say in what's on the agenda. And so in that way, there's this tension, this check and balance that's built into our Constitution. And, I say New Hampshire is the most anti-tyrannical state because we have, we have the separation of powers like everyone does, the legislative, executive, and the judicial. But we're extra about it because even within our executive branch, we're the only state that has a bicameral executive branch. We don't believe in a unitary executive. We want to have more public oversight, more opportunity for issues to get hashed out, and more transparency. And so, that's why we have the Executive Council, and it's just an incredible honor to serve. So, yeah.
What's the interaction like? I mean, as you said a moment ago, you're the only first termer, right? Currently on the council. Oh, no, John Stephen as well.
John Stephen. Yeah.
John Stephen. So two of you are first termers, although both of you in your own ways have been very involved in state and regional, county, local. I mean, for many years, you're both well-known figures in your respective parties and so forth. But the only Democrat. What's the coalition building been like? How is that matched up to what you might have anticipated at the beginning of the year?
Yeah, so that is the piece. That is definitely a really interesting thing. So I am the only Democrat. Um, and sometimes there are issues that come down along party lines and it's 4-1. Um, but honestly, I will say, so first of all, 90% of the time, the votes are actually 5-0. We're unified. We're just trying to make sure state government is running smoothly and that we're looking at the contracts, making sure the vendors are qualified, just doing that kind of oversight. And 90% of the time, the votes are 5-0. So of the remainder that are maybe controversial, I guess you could say, or where there's some division, sometimes it's 4-1, but actually, most often, the way it breaks down is actually boys against girls. So I am the only Democrat, but I am not the only woman. There's one other woman, Janet Stevens, in the Seacoast area.
Yep.
And a lot of the times when there are votes that have, in that 10% that are some kind of a difference, the votes come down 3-2, boys against girls. And so it's been interesting to see the gender dynamics. That's definitely part of it. And the other interesting piece, you were talking about coalition building. You might think, and I think a lot of people would expect that the Republicans would always be united. The 4 Republican councilors would always be united. And that, in fact, the governor is a Republican and that the 4 Republicans and the governor would be united. But in fact, because of this sort of constitutional tension that's built in, there are some times anyway where the governor is bringing something forward because she wants it to pass, and yet it gets stymied by the three men on the executive council. And yet the three men on the executive council are not always going to vote together. There are two councilors, John Stephen and David Wheeler, who frequently vote together. I think they probably have 100% track record of voting together. But Joe Kenny, all five of us are people who are, we're the second highest ranking officials in state government. And so I think we all have a pretty healthy sense of ourselves. And, I get the impression that, Joe Kenny or, no one wants to be taken for granted. And so you can't count that coalition of the three men. That doesn't even always hold true forever or always, I would say. And so it's interesting to see. I think a lot of the times it really breaks down issue by issue. Um, Councilor Kenny and I both represent the North Country. He represents a lot more of the North Country. He's got all of Coos County, but I've got parts of the North Country too. And so I think there are times that we have some things in common because of that. We want to make sure the North Country has a strong voice in Concord. And then, there are definitely issues that are just, they break down issue by issue. And so I've got a philosophy I've had my entire life. I say you should never burn bridges because you just never know when you're going to have a chance to connect with someone. And even if you don't agree with someone all the time, you might agree with them sometime and you just never know. And so that's been, I think we do have a sense of collegiality among us. There's only five. So
Right.
that's a pretty, there's a lot of interpersonal dynamics at work. And so I think we have good relationships with each other. And I think we try and work together as much as we can, while also respecting the fact that there are going to be some things that we're never going to agree on. One thing that we did agree on, you guys might have heard earlier this year that there was a little tug of war between the governor and the executive council. The governor wanted to go paperless, although that was kind of what she was saying. It was really about power and control. She wanted to decide what documents the executive council was going to receive and decided that all of a sudden certain documents we didn't need to receive anymore. And it was interesting to see how that actually unified all five of us. Because one thing we can be unified about is that we don't want the governor telling us what to do. And so, it's definitely interesting. And I think I'm definitely using all of the skills, all of the experience, all of the background that I've built over 20 years, serving in a nonpartisan office in Lebanon anyway. We don't run for city council based on party. And so I'm accustomed to working in a nonpartisan environment. And so I think that has really translated well to the executive council.
So the congeniality you described, there's a familiarity, especially having such a small group. The five of you, the six with the governor, I suppose, during the meetings. The congeniality does not necessarily translate, apparently, between the executive council and some of the GOP folks in the Senate, and in this case, particularly, it appears in the House. And so I know one of the things in promoting this conversation today is, I've described it as frivolous. I think that's actually a rather polite way of describing it, but, trying to a little congeniality, I suppose. But you can take a moment to describe it. It's not articles of impeachment. It's an inquiry, which may be a distinction without a difference. No elected official in New Hampshire has ever been impeached. And this is the definition of frivolity. But you've got a couple of legislators, GOP legislators in the House, who have decided that they want to inquire as to whether or not this is something they should pursue. It's silliness, but it gets in the paper. And so folks don't necessarily read the second, third, fourth, fifth, 10th paragraph, and then it becomes a thing. We're entering 2026. Tell us, Councilor Leo Hill, about this frivolity, and what are the steps ahead, and especially for Democrats who are watching, who are concerned about it. They're the ones paying attention. What should they be kind of girded up to do in the weeks and maybe next couple of months on this topic?
Oh, yeah, that's great. Thank you for the question. I mean, there's a whole, but her emails, right? There's
There you go.
uh this um this theme here. So, I definitely have a big target on my back. It started from the minute I won the primary, actually back in 24, in September of 24. They were after me. Someone filed a campaign finance grievance against me that was recently resolved. Um, the latest thing, though, is that the Representative Joe Sweeney has filed a House resolution for regarding and looking. It's a House resolution directing the House to investigate whether there is cause to impeach me based on emails that I sent regarding a voter suppression in New Hampshire. So let me talk about the technical components real quick, because I think not a lot of people know what is going on here. But basically, you might recall that back in the spring, well, and I would say just consistently, Republicans are trying to pass voter suppression laws in New Hampshire and across the country. This is part of a national movement to make it harder for certain people to vote, because when you're not winning based on your ideas, you want to try and rig the system. And so this is part of the Republican national agenda, is to make it harder for people to vote so that they can hold on to their power. Well, in New Hampshire, back in, I think it was SB 187 passed back in the spring. This is something that would make it harder for people to vote by absentee ballot. And the governor signed it into law. Well, I got a call from a constituent of mine who was very concerned about this law. And he asked me if I would speak to a lawyer who works in voting rights. And I said, of course, this is a typical kind of constituent service. So I took the call with this attorney, a young woman named Tina, and we chatted about her concerns about the law. We thought that it might affect people who are mobility challenged or who are elderly. Those would be the kind of people most likely to be affected. And I said, why don't I introduce you to some folks in New Hampshire who are working in this area and who might have more information about how people would be affected by this law. And so I sent an email. I introduced her by email to the folks who run Meals on Wheels, for example, to the head of the Disability Rights Commission for New Hampshire, to the head of the Developmental Disabilities Commission, to Olivia Zink at Open Democracy, and to Lisa Bodwin, who also does advocacy for people with disabilities. And I sent those emails from my nh.gov email account, just saying, if you have any information, we're concerned about this law, want to learn more about the impacts on New Hampshire voters. If you have any information, please let Tina know. And the Republicans are now, that is what they are bringing me forward for. Their claim is that because there could potentially be a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of this law, which would be a lawsuit against the state of New Hampshire. Their claim is that I breached a fiduciary duty to the state by potentially being involved in a lawsuit against the state. Now, that is not there's nothing that I did that is illegal. I have consulted with many great attorneys, including Paul Toomey, who is legendary in election law in New Hampshire. And anyway, there's nothing and I was a city councilor for 20 years, so I know what typical constituent services is. And look, it's always, anyone has the ability to go to court if they feel that they're being wronged by their government, whether it's their town hall or whether it's their state, the state legislature. You always have the ability to go to court to seek justice. And I'm always able, I didn't in this case, but even if I did say, go to court and start a lawsuit, that would even be legal. I didn't do anything wrong. But of course, the truth is, so that's the sort of technical part of it. And so they're going to be bringing up this bill, this HR House resolution will be coming up in January. It'll be introduced in January, either on the 7th or the 8th. I think it's scheduled to be introduced on the 7th. It'll go through the House. There'll be a committee hearing. Then if the House passes it, it will go to the Senate for a trial. That will be like the real trial. And then if the Senate finds me guilty, then I could be removed from office and potentially barred from ever running for office again in New Hampshire. So even though the facts do not, create a legal problem, the politics is what creates the problem. And so that's the real issue. Being a Democrat is an impeachable offense. And this is really the Trumpian kind of clickbait political theater spectacle that's happening. Joe Sweeney and some of the other elected Republicans in the legislature have really adopted um, this kind of political theater and are bringing the Trump style politics to New Hampshire, and it's really sad because what they're doing, I think this is part of a distraction campaign because they're just so unserious. They're doing all kinds of silly things, but it's really to distract from all of their failures. They are completely failing to make life better for the people of New Hampshire. And I think that's really the real political issue here is, the the they want to silence me. I'm the only Democrat in the executive branch. They want to silence me, but it's more than that. I think they really want to silence all of us. They want to silence all Democrats, and that's what we're really up against here.
Well, I think culturally, what we see at the national level, you alluded to this a moment ago, where President Trump and his administration have sued or threatened to sue, for example, law firms, national level law firms, who he perceives as pushing in the wrong direction or pushing too hard. And that threat, the real menace of it, isn't simply the lawsuits itself. It is that anybody thinking about saying, much less doing something, are feeling they may want to think twice before they advocate for or against an idea, which is about as un-American as it gets, because we're not talking about anybody, in your case, at the national case, who are coloring outside the lines of the law or even of what traditionally over the last quarter millennium we've said is generally of a free and open country. And this is a real attack at that feeling that you should be able to say your piece and advocate for the things you believe in without the risk of kind of things that now they're threatening to do to you. And it does distract from, a question that I think Democrats 2026 really need to be asking in New Hampshire and to some extent nationally. But in New Hampshire, look, property taxes are hanging over us as one of the biggest issues. They're among the highest in the country. We have a housing crisis that is not getting better, it's getting worse. We have a collapse in our student population, and then we have a lot of threats to your local public schools. If you don't make very much money, your access to decent health coverage is severely compromised now compared to not that long ago. And so the question, if any of these issues matter to you, are your property taxes better off now than they were 10 years ago when Republicans largely took the trifecta for the most part of state government? Is the housing situation better than it was 8 or 10 years ago? Is access to health insurance and quality health care without breaking your back financially, is that better than it was 8 or 10 years ago? And are you feeling safer about the future of your local public school than you were 8 or 10 years ago? In all of these, the answer is since Republicans took the wheel in 2016, not so much. It's worse. And so there's two ways you can handle it. One is you could try to make it better, or you could try to change the subject. And I think what we're talking about here is one of the most overt examples of trying to change the subject. And so I think, especially after the holidays, at least for some period of time, this will likely be a top tier issue in the New Hampshire political environment once it's introduced. So talk a little bit, you alluded to it, but talk a little bit about the timeline and then what should people be watching for? How can folks watching, whether today or on the podcast later, how can they get engaged to be able to keep track of it and then to, advocate on the side of being able to speak for peace, whether you're an elected official or not.
Yeah. So the the bill will be introduced in the first day of the legislative session is January 7th. This House resolution will be introduced then, and it will then get assigned. It's, in fact, it's already, you can look it up. If you go onto the general court website, you can look up, if you put in keyword impeachment, you'll see I'm actually not the only one that they're bringing forward for impeachment. I haven't looked at the other ones, but I noticed I'm not the only one. But it has been assigned to House Judiciary. So at some point, House Judiciary will hold a hearing. Every single bill in New Hampshire receives a hearing, and that is a chance for the public to come in and testify. So you can certainly look out for me. I'll be doing a press conference, and I'm going to invite people to join me on January 7th to do a press conference at the State House to make some big noise about this. And then when we know when that hearing is scheduled, that's going to be really important. I definitely think this is a chance for people to come out and say, wait a minute, you know, an attack on Karen is an attack on all of us. Like, you cannot silence all of us. This is, this is the most undemocratic thing. If people don't like how I'm doing my job, well, that's why in New Hampshire we have 2-year election cycles. The voters have the chance to replace me in November. That's the way it works. I didn't do anything impeachable. I'm just happened to be a Democrat and the highest ranking Democrat in state government. And so that's why I'm this big target. But they're coming for all of us. They would much prefer that none of us are speaking up. And there is this chilling effect. And so I definitely think I'm going to be inviting, hopefully, a lot of people to join me, whether for the press conference, but especially at the public hearing, because I think it's important that we have people on the record saying, this is enough. We need to actually get work done for the people of New Hampshire and stop with this silly, unserious political spectacle that's going on. I mean, like you said, you can either solve problems or you can distract from the fact that you're not solving problems. And, you might remember, another one of these gimmicks was Governor Ayotte, right? The day after Zoran Mamdani won this election for mayor of New York City, she had box trucks in New York City trolling Mayor Mamdani and, talking about how afraid of socialism, come to New Hampshire, the live free or die state. And it was so silly and unserious. And this is the thing. We have serious problems. A lot of people just got their property tax bills, and I just got mine, and nobody's property taxes in New Hampshire went down. Okay. And if you've been paying property taxes in New Hampshire, over the last 10 years, more than that. But the Republicans have been in control, nearly unanimous control of our entire state government for almost the entire history of our state, 250 years. Okay. And somehow they have blamed Democrats for the fact that we have high property taxes. That is outrageous. And I think that's why, I am doing my job. I am serious about doing my job. And over this past year, I went around and I gave presentations about how I'm seeing Project 2025 and the Free State Project un, un you know, uh, unfolding at the state level. And in January, I'm going back out on the road and I'm going to be doing presentations about why our property taxes in New Hampshire are so high and what we can do about it. Because I think it's time for Democrats to go on offense on property taxes. I was a city councilor for 20 years and I saw firsthand that when the state cuts the budget, when the state fails to address its obligations, it's local property taxpayers who pay the price. And that is something that we need to have an honest conversation about. We need to hold Republicans accountable. Here they are impeaching me, sending box trucks and billboards to New York City as if that's some kind of economic strategy to recruit businesses to New Hampshire. We need to lower the cost of housing. We need to make sure everyone has access to health care. We need to lower property taxes. We need to actually make sure that all the 160,000 kids in New Hampshire in our public schools are getting a good education so that our businesses can have the workforce that they need. These are the serious problems that are facing our state. And the Republicans are basically doing everything they can to try and distract from the fact that they're not solving them. So yes, we have to deal with this impeachment, but I can tell you that I have not let it stop me or slow me down, and I will not. So in January, I will go. I will, make a big noise. I will hopefully be joined by a lot of people, and we can make the point that this is not. We don't need Trump-style politics in New Hampshire. Um, what we need is to get down to work. So those are the things to look out for. That would be January 7th when the new legislature is in session, and to keep an eye out for when that public hearing will happen with the House Judiciary Committee. And I've got a newsletter that I send out about twice a month, and I'll be keeping people posted there. I'm also on social media, so you can find me on Facebook, on Instagram, and I'm trying to get back onto Twitter, although it kind of pains me. um, but find me there because I will be keeping people posted and definitely going through the local Democratic committees and the county committees to let people know whether it's letters to the editor or coming to hold signs or offering public testimony before the House Judiciary Committee. I'm going to need a lot of help because, this is there's a lot of resources. The Republicans are using this to raise money. I've been forwarded emails where, they literally put together an impeachkaren.com website. So they're using this to raise money, and they are definitely going to be coming at me with a lot of resources. I'm raising funds myself to fight this political battle, and I hope it doesn't come to a legal battle in the Senate. But I may have to raise legal defense funds as well if it gets to that point. But I'm hoping that we can have a good show of public strength and say, enough is enough. Let's focus on the serious business in New Hampshire.
Well, and you alluded to this, that you are preparing in 26. We were talking before the program about a tour. One of the things about being the only statewide, the only executive counselor is it means, and I've seen you do this. I've seen others over the years. In a way, it means that you end up being the voice for Democrats who are not represented in the other four of our population when they're looking for information, when they want to learn more about what the council is, about what kind of issues you're dealing with, the real world, some of the things we talked about
Yeah.
earlier, the coalitions and so forth. So allows you also to take a message or conversation on the road. And this year, you did a fair amount of that related to what is the Free State Movement? What's the project like? What are its ramifications? They've clearly been very influential. But now tweaking that topic to why the heck are your property taxes so high? There's the downshift. You alluded to it. Take it for another second there. What are some of the practical reasons if somebody's in a district with particularly Republican House or Republican state Senate members? What are some of the practical questions that you would like somebody to ask at the grocery store or if they ever hold a town hall to kind of be like, listen, my property taxes are higher than last year. They're higher than the year before that. They're going up. Should they be demanding their legislators be doing that would have the most impact, direct or indirect, to helping start, turning the tide on these property taxes?
Yeah. Well, as you know from being a local official, and as I know from being a local official, tax bills come from your city or your town, right? And that's who you have to write your check to, or your mortgage company writes the check to.
Yep.
And so everyone looks to their select board or the city council or their school board. They blame those people. That's where the blame goes for high property taxes. But it's really not the fault of school boards or city councils or select boards why New Hampshire's property taxes are so high. And this is the piece that I feel is really important for people to understand, is that what happens in Concord directly affects our property taxes. And I'll give you just, a couple of examples that I think are not well understood. We talk about education a lot, and I know you had Dave Luno on, legend in New Hampshire education. And the state is covering, of our tax bills, if about 60% of those is typically public for public schools, less than 10% is coming from the state to help with that. So already, if the state would address adequate funding of public schools, that would have a huge effect potentially on providing property tax relief to people. But let's talk about the other 40% of the bill, which is mostly about 5% of that is county, but most of that is your municipal issues like roads and bridges or water and wastewater, like when you flush your toilet, that's some people have septic, some people live in a city where they have water and sewer. So all of these things are handled at the local level. And over the years, though, the state has actually been making it harder. And this is a concept called downshifting, which is not like great, people know that it's not a word people know, but you do understand that if someone doesn't pay their bill and they leave it to you to pay, that you're going to end up paying more. And that's basically what has happened for decades now at the state level. And here are two good examples. One is with the rooms and meals tax. So, when you go out to a restaurant, there's an extra 9% that we pay. So in New Hampshire, we don't have a sales tax, but we do have a rooms and meals tax. That's 9% that gets added onto your bill and in a restaurant, or if you buy prepared food somewhere. Well, back when that tax was put in place about 40 years ago, so in the 80s, the deal was struck between the state and the municipalities that 40% of those funds that are collected would be returned to the cities and towns. Because after all, we're the ones that have to have the police departments and the fire departments, and we have to deal with the roads. And so all of these things that people, restaurant patrons are benefiting from are paid for by cities and towns. And so that was the deal. That was what the legislature agreed to back in the 80s. And they said, okay, we will give 40% of the revenue collected from rooms and meals to cities and towns. The state will keep 60%. Well, it will come as no surprise whatsoever that the state has never made good on that. In fact, cities and towns have had to fight tooth and nail. The highest ratio it ever got was 80-20. Okay, so of the 40% we were going to get, cities and towns have only gotten up to 20%. Now, when you add that up over 40 years, that's hundreds of millions of dollars that have not come to cities and towns. It's hundreds of millions of dollars that local property taxpayers have had to pick up. And that's just one. I'll give you one more because I could go on and on and on. But this next one is actually billions of dollars. I'm talking about the New Hampshire retirement system. So New Hampshire is a small state, and when the state was trying to address retirement costs, it decided to create its own state retirement system. Now, of course, the way that these retirement programs work is the bigger the pool, the better it is for everyone. You can keep the costs low, you have more money to invest. So you want to have as big a pool as possible. So the state invited cities and towns to say, hey, you've got public employees as well. If you join our state retirement system, and school districts,
Right.
cities, towns, school districts, if you join the state retirement system, we will pay 35% of the cost. Okay? We will pay 35% of the cost of retirement. Well, it will also come as no surprise that the state very quickly said, oh, actually, we're going to lower that. And we're going to lower that. We're going to lower that. Over the years, they lowered it until in 2010, the state's contribution to cities and towns and school districts was zero. Zero. Now, this over decades. Now that's been 15 years. They did like 2 years ago, they gave like a one-time, you know, helpful, they gave, I forget, 7% or something to cities and towns, but it was a one-time thing. So then the Republicans took credit for all this property tax relief, but they did not take credit for the billions of dollars that local property taxpayers have had to pick up over the last several decades since the state retirement system was created. And that is absolutely because of the decisions that largely Republican majorities in Concord have made. And so our property taxes, those are just two examples. There's more. There's been less funding for roads and bridges, less funding for water and sewer programs, less funding over the years, over time, less funding coming from the state means higher property taxes at the local level. And yet the Republicans are very good at the blame game, and they have gotten all of us to say, oh, go talk to your select board. You think your taxes are too high? Talk to your select board. Talk to your school board. Meanwhile, the select board and the school board have no control over what the Republicans in Concord are doing to increase property taxes at the local level. And so that's why I am really passionate, as you can tell, about getting this message out there, because I know the facts. I've seen it firsthand. And I think this is something that I can help people understand better so that we can get out of this cycle and hold Republicans accountable.
Well, yeah, yes, I believe yesterday on Thursday, Representative Joe Sweeney, I believe Representative Joe Alexander from Goffstown, maybe a few others, were down in Massachusetts for a press conference they did with a couple of conservative, national conservative groups and some of their state chapters to fantastically thank Maura Healey for driving businesses into the arms of New Hampshire. Unfortunately for them, about 2 hours after they did that, Anheuser-Busch announced that they were going to be closing their, I believe, more than half a century old presence in Merrimack, which will be very significant to the community down there. The optics of that press conference with that terrible news could not have come at a worse time. They went through a long chart of advantages where the taxes are generally lower or non-existent in New Hampshire relative to Massachusetts. And look, on some of those, totally get it. There are advantages, competitive advantages in some of them. But I noticed it is conspicuous, the absence on a chart that has literally 12 to 15 different sorts of taxes where they're doing the side by side. And they missed the biggest one for the overwhelming majority of the people of New Hampshire, the property taxes. They don't put that one on the chart. That one would not look so good on that chart. And it's somehow, and I think this is a real challenge for Democrats in New Hampshire. It's very New Hampshire centric quirk that over the course of more than half a century, somehow taxes apply for everything except for the big one, the property tax. And so when they have a bill in the legislature this year to further reduce the business enterprise tax from 0.55%, I believe, to 0.5%, and I believe that would generate a loss of between $20 and $30 million a year of revenue at a time when we're already running short early in this biennial budget cycle projections. We're already probably going to be looking for some money in the till now, and this would knock it back another 25 million bucks.
Well, yeah, and we're going to have to pay for the EFAs, the school vouchers that are completely
Totally,
blowing through any kind of budget projections. Yeah.
totally, like way past something that was originally supposed to be a few million bucks a year. It's going to be over 50 million for the current school year, and they're looking to eliminate the cap, the annual growth cap, which would mean sky's the limit and could be closer to 100 million bucks a year within a few years. And so they position it as when we eliminate the interest and dividends tax, when we cut the business enterprise tax, that is revenue that is no longer needed and is not having to be made up for in any other area. And of course, what ends up happening, as you say well a moment ago, lion's share of that ends up getting kicked down to local property taxes. And it is not DEI for the reason for local spending, and it's not fraud, waste, and abuse, and it's not profligate spenders. I always find it interesting that even in the reddest towns in New Hampshire, Representative Ross Berry from Ware is one of the leaders of this sort of discussion, one of the young guns in the House for the GOP. And he lives in Ware, which is one of the most conservative and
Mhm.
Republican performing and very Trump performing towns in the entire state. And yet, even in the town of Ware, their property taxes are going up. They don't have a choice either. These are conservative electoral bases in these red towns that are realizing that the choice is not tighten your belt a little bit or not. It is, you're going to have teachers next year? Not. Are you going to do trash pickup next year? Or not? Police and fire? Guess that's not really optional. And they realize that this also has impacts on their local property values. If people perceive the local school district as not going well, that nothing will drag down the future value increases of your home faster than if the reputation of the local school district is in the trash can. This is all related. So even in the towns of these people, their own taxpayers are telling them the problem doesn't go away. Simply it's kicked down the road to us, whether it's Portsmouth, Ware, or anywhere in between. And I think Democrats, and I'm so glad you're doing this tour because I think folks, particularly those in relatively high profile positions in state government like you, have a unique ability to reposition the conversation and put the spotlight exactly in this sort of a way. So it sounds like that's something that we'll be seeing you hitting the road at some point, probably early in the new year. Fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the first few months I want to be. I'm on the road a lot. I'm usually about 1,000 miles a week. I'm doing, and I like to get around. It was really great to get around the state last year and talk to folks. I mean, I have information to share, but I'm always learning as well of what's on people's minds. You know, property taxes. To one of your points earlier, property taxes are also the biggest tax facing small business in New Hampshire. Okay. So, the Republicans love to take credit for, cutting taxes and, they're certainly not cutting property taxes. They are cutting business profits tax, business enterprise tax, which disproportionately affect big business and out of state business. Okay. That's who they're benefiting, okay? That's who is benefiting from the Republican tax cutting schemes. Now, it sounds good because, you know, everyone kind of agrees that taxes are bad, so we want to cut taxes. But, you know, does the business profits tax or the business enterprise tax affect the average New Hampshire resident? No, it does not. And so cutting them also does not help the average New Hampshire resident. And in fact, what the Republicans have been doing, what the elected Republicans, in Concord have been working on is cutting taxes for big business and the ultra wealthy through, BPT and BET. Another factor that's at play right now is, so where does New Hampshire get its revenue? We don't have a sales tax. We don't have an income tax. We have, so we've got those business taxes, which the Republicans are cutting. We also have sin taxes, okay? So we've got gambling. So there's some money that comes in through gambling. And we have alcohol, okay? Alcohol. Now, alcohol used to be a much larger source of revenue. People are drinking less. You know what they're doing more? Edibles. New Hampshire has not legalized marijuana. Okay, so we're not getting any revenue there. And people are drinking less. In fact, our liquor revenues are down 25%. So, and that is not expected to improve significantly, okay? Like that's a
Right.
trend that's going to persist. And so we are looking the Republicans right now and I have to say Dave Luno is so good. He calls them elected Republicans and it's really good because in New Hampshire a lot of us know kind of traditional Republicans, you know, I you it's like a different generation, a different mentality. The Republicans of today are not the Republicans of yesterday in New Hampshire. They are not the sort of moderate, Republicans that used to be the Republican Party in New Hampshire. It is the Republican Party in New Hampshire right now is completely dominated by an anti-government philosophy. So this Free State Project, even though they've only had about 7,000 people move to New Hampshire in the last 20 years, they are disproportionately in power in Concord. And so of the there's about 222 Republicans in the state house right now. Of those 222 Republicans, about 150 of them are either free staters or voting almost unanimously with a free state agenda, which is an anti-government agenda. And so this whole thing about, taking the income cap off of the voucher program, the point is to destroy public schools. That's the whole point. The whole point is to dismantle public schools. And the whole point of reducing revenue at the state level, of reducing business taxes, the whole point of that, of reducing the interest and dividends tax, which also disproportionately affected very wealthy individuals, the whole point of reducing those taxes is also to dismantle state government. And that's really the philosophy that we're up against right now. It used to be that Republicans and Democrats had differences of opinion about how much government, less government, more government, Now it's actually, should we have government at all? That's the Republican philosophy of today is government is bad. Like Grover Norquist said, he said, I'm not anti-government. I just want to shrink it to the size that it could fit, that I could drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub. Okay, sounds pretty anti-government. And that's the philosophy that's in play right now. And we see it across the board. And I think, though, in New Hampshire, we understand, everyone drives on roads. All kids deserve to go to a public school. A certain amount of government is necessary. We want to have clean water. We want to know that we can turn the faucet on and trust the water. And when bad things happen, like there's PFAS, that government should be there to protect people who are getting exploited by big business and ultra wealthy interests, and that there is a role for government. And so that's why, my mother died when I was really young. I was 6 years old. She died of cancer. And I had two younger siblings. And my father had just started a roofing business and was a struggling small business owner. And our family got by with the help of Social Security. It made a big difference for my family. And when I was in college and I was a young single college student. My daughter was born 10 weeks early, and she was in the neonatal intensive care unit for 5 weeks. And I was only able to go back to school and finish my studies thanks to Medicaid that covered her health care. So I know firsthand the power of government to improve people's lives. I believe in government. And I believe government is simply how we join together, all of us, to solve problems that we can't solve on our own, like building roads and bridges or public schools, or making sure that if people are going through, really difficult circumstances and they might need help buying groceries, that there is help for them. And that's why I've served for 20 years as a city councilor. It's why I'm really just feel so privileged to get to now serve at the state level. And that's the philosophy that I bring. And that's the philosophy that I think we need to defend and bring to the people. And it's time to put the Republicans on offense, or it's time to put the Republicans on defense, because they're just out here dismantling government and not solving problems. They are not lowering the cost of housing. They are not lowering our property taxes. They are not making sure that all kids have access to education. And they're not making sure that everyone who needs to go to the doctor has access. And so, that's what I'm working on.
Well, it's a full plate. We, as we approach the 1 hour mark, there were a few comments and questions. Maybe we can take it in sort of a rapid fire. Um, one of them, well, two of them here. One was kind of a broader question about the role of Bitcoin in state government. It looks like there's going to be a bond issued for about $100 million, valued at about 100 million, where Bitcoin will serve as the collateral. Um, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I actually just spoke with James Key Wallace, who is the head of our business finance authority. So, really important for everyone to know that this is actually through a program. It's called a conduit bond. And it's actually, there's no state money involved. It's just that in the state of New Hampshire, if a business wants to access bonds, they have to go through the Business Finance Authority. And so technically that will come to the Executive Council, will hold a hearing and vote on it. But there are no taxpayer dollars at stake. This is not something, there's no risk. There's no taxpayer dollars at stake, and there's also no risk. The state of New Hampshire or taxpayers are not taking on any risk related to this. I think we'll see if it happens. It's going through due diligence, and I guess if it goes through due diligence, then it will come to us, and we'll have a hearing. And um, you know, I, I guess I don't have too many strong feelings about how businesses want to handle their financing. If they think it's appropriate to do, if a lender wants to take Bitcoin as collateral and a business wants to offer it, I'm not sure that I necessarily want to get in the way of that.
Right.
Certainly that's why my questions for business finance, well, I made sure that there's no state money at stake because I don't think the taxpayers should be at all involved in this. But I think really what it is actually part of this free state agenda, which is to make New Hampshire, the most free. And so they passed a bill last year that had to do with Bitcoin. Um, the state treasurer. So now technically the state is allowed to invest in Bitcoin. Now, the state treasurer has not elected to do so yet. It was much more of a photo op, part of this political gimmicks and this political theater. So the governor and I forget who it was, the two state representatives or whatever that were involved. But I think it was really so that they could go out and say, look, New Hampshire, we're Bitcoin friendly, So all of you other Bitcoin enthusiasts, come to New Hampshire. You're welcome here. And I think that this bond, if it happens, is also part of that political theater as well.
And so we'll keep an eye on that. A couple questions related to the Anheuser-Busch news of yesterday. A reminder that there's a smaller location in Portsmouth that is affected by a much broader Anheuser-Busch set of moves that are occurring. And it sounds like Governor Ayotte made an initial remark saying that there would be um, vigorous efforts from the executive branch to try to help those that are going to be displaced because of that. It's obviously very early. Do you anticipate in a situation like that, is that something where the executive council, at a minimum, will be informed, or will there be decisions placed in front of you as a five pack that you might have to discuss related to how to help when you have what could be a pretty big layoff happening sometime in 2026?
Yeah, and how sad to get this news like right during the holidays. I mean, it's like it's really distressing. So we have a department is our Department of Employment Security. They're the ones that are responsible for distributing unemployment funds, which are actually federal dollars, but we are responsible for distributing them at the state level. And so, and then also we do have a practice, and I wouldn't be surprised in this case if oftentimes, if there's a large employer that has an event like this, the Department of Employment Security will often go and actually put together like a rapid response team that would have people from business and economic affairs, maybe health and human services, because people might become eligible to apply for like food stamps or, other kinds of assistance. Maybe they're going to lose health insurance and they need to figure out how to get onto Medicaid or something. And so a lot of times they'll put together a rapid response team and actually go on site to that business so that they can, so to make it nice and easy for employees who are going to be affected to get immediate access to resources. So I suspect that's what Governor Ayotte was talking about in terms of the state deploying resources immediately. I would expect that probably one or more of executive counselors will want to talk about this and more at our meeting next week. So we'll see. If there is an agenda item from the Department of Employment Security, that will give us an avenue, a vehicle where we can ask the commissioner to talk about this. And of course, we can email a commissioner or call a commissioner and get more information. But that's what the state can do and has done in the past. We had J.C. Penney, and I remember when I think I was mayor, J.C. Penney unexpectedly filed bankruptcy, and so the state did put together a rapid response team, came up to help. I think it was about 150 employees who were affected, and just tried to make the transition as smooth as possible for people and help them start looking for other employment. Employment security, it's kind of a funny name. I think in a way it might be better referred to or thought of as the Department of Career Services, because they actually have a lot of resources, not just for unemployed people who need some cash assistance, but also for people who might want to transition to a different industry or a different field. They really do a lot to help workers connect with employers, and they work with employers to make those opportunities available. So they're a big resource, the Department of Employment Security.
Well, that's all good information. We'll obviously keep our eyes open, and we're thinking of those working there, particularly, as you say, during this holiday season. We're going to close up. So always ask folks on the way out the door, anything you want to plug? Whether it's your website, obviously 2026 is coming up. Shall we presume that you intend to run again for the Executive Council in 2026?
Yes, 100%.
There, well,
100%.
we have news.
I love this job. I would love to keep doing it for a long time. And so, in order to do that, I need to get through this impeachment. And so I would ask for everyone to keep your ears open for this. And if you're willing to help me, whether it's writing a letter to the editor, whether it's coming in person to support me at the press conference, or to sign up to testify on when this resolution comes up to the House Judiciary Committee, maybe sometime in January. I really need all the help that I can get. I am kind of a one-woman operation. I do have some part-time staff help, which is great, but I need to raise resources. So if you can't come in person, I will happily accept contributions, because we do have to be able to match what the Republican resources are that are going to be unloaded against me over the next couple of months. So I definitely would love to be reelected in November, but before I can do that, I've got to get through January. And so please follow me on social media. I do have a website, KarenLeoHill.com, and you can easily sign up there for my newsletter. And you can also make a contribution if you are so inclined. It's really such a great pleasure and an honor to serve the people of New Hampshire. And to a point you made earlier, I know I represent the 81 cities and towns of District 2 on the Executive Council, but I also know that I am a voice for people across the state who otherwise would not have a voice at that table. And so I take both of those jobs really seriously and plan to continue to do so. They can't keep me down.
There you go. Well, it's going to be an exciting year in 2026. I think generally a very good year for Democrats, but not without a lot of pushback from a GOP at the state and national level that obviously would like to continue to hold the trifectas that they currently have, both in Washington and here at home in Concord. Karen, thank you so much for joining us today. Always appreciate it. I really enjoy spending time with you. And again, folks can find you at KarenLeoHill.com, correct? That's the website?
That's right.
Good, good. You can never say that enough. Thank you, Karen. And thank you all for listening or watching today. You can find the recording of this sometime in the near future. And if you're watching this on a podcast, or YouTube, you already figured it out, uh, at, at Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It's the Steve Marchand Podcast. Also got a YouTube channel. If you get to that YouTube channel, please subscribe. And that way, whenever we have new content, such as when this goes up, you'll be able to get a notification immediately. You won't have to find out from somebody else. And my Substack, which is where you are hearing this today. It's stevemarchand.com. If you're not a subscriber already, please consider doing so. Have been doing this for almost a year now, and you can be a free subscriber or paid subscriber. Paid subscribers get a lot of fun benefits. They're going to have some programming, live and online programming in 2026, as well as full access to the archive, which is now up to about 120 pieces for 2025. It'll all stay up there. A lot of data and analysis and writing that if you enjoy conversations like this, if you love politics, if you love New Hampshire politics, you'll probably enjoy that too. So thanks again for watching and listening. We'll do it again next week. We've got some great shows set up for the later part of next week. We'll let you know about those shortly. So good to have you, Karen. And
And
thank you
Steve,
all again.
thank you for the tremendous service that you provide to the people of New Hampshire. What you are doing, the data that you have analyzed, the work that you're doing on messaging, the just you have invested so much in our state, and I just really respect and admire the work that you're doing, and I'm very thankful for it.
Well, right back at you. That's very kind. This is the best state in the country, so we're
Yeah,
going to try to make it even better. That's the goal.
exactly.
Anyway, if I don't see you guys before, happy holidays to you all. We'll hopefully see you here again very soon. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye, everyone.